Shalom Aleichem. We are exploring the Sichas, volume Chaf Beis 22, Sicha Behar-Bechukosai. And the Rabbi opens with a question: why would we combine these two portions together when they have opposite themes? The Rebbe maintains that when two portions are combined, it's not just because of the convenience of the calendar. You know, we have a leap year, we need more parshas, so we divide them. Sometimes we connect them. No, the fact that portions are connected, b'hashgacha pratis, and according to the calendar of our sages, means that these two are really one and the same portion. In a sense, they're one portion. And the proof of this is expressed in the fact that the fourth aliyah of the portion is read by one person, and that aliyah reads part of the first portion and part of the second. Apparently, there are different minhagim that say no. You should read 4 in one portion and 3 in the other, because there are two portions that are being combined for the 7 readers because of convenience. But the accepted custom is that we don't do that. We specifically make a point to combine that the aliyah of Ravi'i is part of each portion. Says the Rebbe, that means that one reader makes a Berchas HaTorah on part of each portion, indicating that they're one in the same portion. The fact that sometimes they're connected, incidentally, the year that we're teaching this Sicha, they're not connected, but the fact that they sometimes connect indicates they have one theme. Another thing that's important to the Rebbe is that the names of the portions are very thematic. Contrary to what people might think, that what's the name of the portion? You know, they picked a word from the beginning of the portion and they made it the name. The Rebbe talks about this a lot in connection to the teaching of Chassidus in Shari Yuchud Ve'emunah, chapter 1, that the name of something represents its life force, and that the names that Chazal gave, B'hashgacha pratis, and that stuck, I guess, for the names of the portion, are very, very important, and they actually spell out the theme and the central soul of the portion. The Rebbe talks about this in many sichas. The Rebbe often proves that there could be different choices of names, which would seem more rational if you're just trying to pick a word from the beginning of the portion. But because really, no, it's not like that at all. The name is the essence. Says the Rebbe, look at these two names. If they are the essence of these two portions are two opposite themes. How could they become one portion? Behar means a mountain, which indicates, in terms of Avodas Hashem, in terms of your personal service of Hashem, you're a mountain, you're uplifted, you're strong, you're firm, you're proud. Bechukosai is the opposite theme, it's humility. Bechukosai means my statutes, the mitzvahs that are super rational, that we do for no reason. As opposed to the other types of mitzvahs, edus, testimonies, and mishpatim, judgments, which make sense or have some rationale. Chukim, chukotai, represents mitzvahs that have no explanation. Why do you do it? You put your mind aside. You're a servant of Hashem. So that's a total opposite theme. Behar is uplifting, proud. I know what I want. Bechukotai means I want nothing. I'm totally dedicated. And these two become one theme? That's the Rebbe's question. And the Rebbe's second question, even furthermore, is that we don't even call the portion Behar Sinai. We call the portion just Behar. And it's not because you can only have one word as the name of the portion. There are many examples of portions that have two words, like Zos HaBracha, Chayei Sarah. And here, the Jewish custom doesn't call it Behar Sinai. You would think, what's the significance of the word Behar? Is it the word Behar or Behar Sinai? You should call it Behar Sinai. Why did the name stick? No, Behar without the Sinai. Specifically because the way it's explained in Chassidus, in the Kutei Torah, that the mountain Har Sinai was chosen for the Torah because it was the shortest of all mountains, as the Medrash says. In Aramaic, Mochich Mikol Turaya. Hashem was looking to bring the Torah, and all the tall mountains wanted the Torah because they figured they're tall and big. The Torah is big. Hashem said no. Har Sinai, Mochich Mikol Turaya, it's the shortest of all mountains. Aha! We'll put the Torah on you. It represents humility, because the only way to connect to Hashem is humility. If you see yourself as a mountain, as important, then you're getting in the way of the truth that it's all Him. Hashem doesn't work well with that. And therefore, the Torah is given on the shortest mountain. This is the message of the Medrash. Says the Alter Rebbe in the Likutei Torah, so why do it on a mountain at all? Do it on a flat land, or for that matter, in a valley. It would represent the humility to the extreme. The Alter Rebbe explains, and this is explained many places in the Rebbe's Sichas as well, that there needs to be some element of mountainhood. A person who feels totally humble, which is the Jewish way, the greatest virtue is humility. It's all Hashem. There's no me, because it is all Him. However, if there isn't an element, if it isn't spiced with what's called shminis shebeshminis, 1/64th of ego, if a person possesses no concept of mountain, they're just Sinai, then that could be a problem. There could be some issues, because number one, when there's a test, when the Yetzer Hara is getting in the way, a person needs chutzpah. He needs inner strength. And if he trained himself just to be humble and meek and nothing and unimportant, where's he going to find that inner strength? God forbid he could lose the battle. Explained in great detail in Tanya chapter 26, that if you have two people battling, which is the model of the two souls, the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov, the Neshama, the Nefesh Abamis, and Nefesh Elokis. So if one is sluggish and lazy and melancholy, he's going to lose even if he's stronger. And therefore, a big part of Avodas Hashem is Simcha. So if a person feels meek and unimportant and insignificant, he's not going to have that inner strength and boldness when he needs to win the battle. And therefore, you need to have a certain sense of mountainhood. Similar but different concept, that a person feels totally insignificant because he's gotten the message of humility and bittul to Hashem, that he's nothing. So a person might say, so what is my whole avodas Hashem worth anyway? Does it even really matter what I do? Do my mitzvahs matter? Does my service of Hashem matter? It's impossible to have a real excitement and passion and strength in your service of Hashem if you feel like you're unimportant. If you're unimportant, then your service is unimportant. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe explains in the Likutei Torah, for these reasons, that yes, we have to also have the element of mountainhood. Even though the essence is Sinai indicating it's the smallest. Also, Sinai represents the thorn bush, which is the smallest, the lowest of the bushes, of the trees. So Sinai represents humility and smallness, and that's the ultimate, that's the essence. That's the default mode of Kedusha. However, sprinkle it with something which is actually borrowed from non-Kedusha. Ego is non-Kedusha, it's Klipa. The mountain aspect is non-Kedusha, but borrow it because we need to temper this humility lest we feel insignificant and we don't have the boldness that we need for our service of Hashem. This is all explained in the Likutei Torah. So coming back here, says the Rebbe, so how come the parsha is called Behar alone? The parsha should be called Sinai alone, or if you will, Har Sinai. But the essence of the service of Hashem is Sinai, Bittul. The Har is only like an extra touch in order to balance it out so you don't fall into melancholy and lose the battle, etc. But we call the parsha not Sinai or Behar Sinai, just Behar. So this becomes the Rebbe's two questions. I'm going to bring up, let me just get control of this meeting, claim host, sorry. I'm going to bring up the spreadsheet to help us with this fantastic Sicha. Fantastic Sicha, as if it needs my endorsement. Okay. But this is fundamental. I don't say that by every Sicha. This is not just amazing, which is true in every Sicha, but it's fundamental, I think, in the Rebbe's Torah. So we just reiterating the two questions that are on top of the screen. Behar and Bechukosai are opposites, uplifting and strength versus bittul and humility. Why combine them? And as we explained, that the Rebbe considers two parshas as to be one. And the second question, why is the name Behar and not Behar Sinai, which would make much more sense? As we explained in great detail, that the whole idea of adding Behar is only an allowance from a space of unholiness in order that the person doesn't fall down, as explained in the Likutei Torah. but the default mode of Kedusha is Sinai. And here the name is only Bahar. So the Rebbe now is going to spend the rest of the Sicha. The Rebbe is going to go off to explain, let's understand the meaning of Bahar and to answer these questions. So the Rebbe introduces, we know in Teda and Chassidus, there's two categories of bittul. Remember, the theme here is bittul. Bittul, a term that loosely means I'm nothing. Humility, self-subjugation, nullification, nothingness. In Chassidus, this is the highest ideal because the truth is it's all God. That's the truth. So the truest way is for a person to be nothing. The truth is the whole world is bottled to Hashem. It's really just Him. So in terms of our avoda, there's no greater ideal for a chassid and an Oved Hashem, a servant of Hashem, than to reach some point of bittul, where the person feels that they're not important, where the person feels totally humble. You know who's the perfect person? Moshe Rabbeinu. There's no me. But the Rebbe says that I want to introduce a concept. There's two types of bittul. So I'm just going to use that term bittul. There's bittul, and the Rebbe calls in the Sicha bittul amiti. And this is very, very novel, in a sense. People who know a lot of Chassidus will say that this is a little bit novel. In bittul itself, there are many levels that are discussed. Bittul hayeshem, bittul b'mitzi, is different levels, as the Sicha itself will touch upon. But the true bittul is a categorically different type of bittul, and in a sense, it's somewhat novel. It's a bittul, as we're going to see, which expresses itself not through humility, but on the contrary, through strength and self-confidence and self-esteem. Counterintuitive. So just to complete that thought, that's going to be the answer to Bahar. Bahar means self-esteem, strength. There's no humility in that word. Because when you have true bittul, there's no need for humility. That's not how it expresses itself. But let's do this. Let's go through it. So the Rebbe says that the Sicha explains to us that we have the two columns. So normally bittul is negation of self. True bittul, there's no negation of self where you feel that it's all Hashem. Truly. And therefore there's no need to negate the self. The example that we have that comes to mind is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He said, Ana simana bi'alma. I am just a sign. There's no me. What Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, it says in the Zohar, which is his book, Man pnei ha'adon Hashem darash bi. When the Torah says that you should go and greet the face of Hashem 3 times a year, Shalish Pam Bashana, you should go to pnei ha'adon Hashem, to see the face of the Master. Hashem, says the Zohar, darash bi. This is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He is Hashem. I don't know the context of the discussion there, but this is an example of he became one with Hashem to the point that there's no him. It is all Hashem, and therefore he is an extension of Hashem. He doesn't have to say, I'm nothing. I'm not nothing. I'm Hashem. Meaning to say, because there's no need to negate self. He's so not himself. He's totally transparent. You might say, as another example, Moshe Rabbeinu in the book of Devarim, he said it on his own accord, but he was so not him that his words is Hashem's words. So this becomes a much greater level of bittul. And what's the difference? I want to just make this point because this is the point of the entire Sicha. Normally we think of bittul, that the starting point is there is me, and then I need to minus me to come closer to he. And the more I minus me, the more I negate, the more I become humble. As we're going to see in the Sicha later, there's numerous levels in that negation. First, I give over my commitment and behavior. Then I give my mind and heart. Then I even give my soul, my willpower. But the bottom line is the common denominator of all of this bittul, the left column of the bittul, that the starting point is that there's something else. But this something else is subjugating himself. And therefore, the bittul must be a minus. It must be my negation. True bittul, the way this Sicha speaks about it, that there's a concept where someone or something is actually not identified as self at all. It belongs to the boss, to the master. And therefore, the bittul is not expressed by negation of self. No, it's itself just master's possession, which is perhaps what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai means. I suspect the Rebbe says it even in the footnotes, so it's not just a perhaps. I think this saw it. Okay. So now says the Rebbe, introduce these two levels of bittul just to qualify them a little bit. So I'm giving an example. This is my own example. Dedicated employee versus dedicated car or horse. A dedicated employee. Envision you have an employee. He knows everything. He understands the business. He cares for the master. He understands the master's vision. He cares for the family of the master. He's dedicated completely. But dedication means that there's him and there's the owner, there's the boss. And he's given over his mind, his heart. But you can't say he's one with the master. He is one in sense of negation. That he gives him his time and his energy and his talent. But he keeps giving. There's a sense of separation. It's by choice. Then there's a dedicated of car. You're going to say, my car is so dedicated. Oh, unbelievable. He's so wonderful. He's not dedicated. He's yours. Or your horse. He's not dedicated. He's your possession. He's yours. And therefore, this becomes an example where you don't have to negate it. The car, the dedicated employee has to show negation, has to show subjugation. The master wants something. He puts aside his thought and does what the master wants. The car doesn't have to be humble, doesn't have to be a smashed up car. It can be a gorgeous car. In fact, it should be a gorgeous car. It doesn't take away from his dedication, the fact that it's in mint condition and gorgeous and running in perfect condition. To the contrary, because there's no question that maybe he'll get in the way and become independent and show arrogance. There's the famous analogy Hasidim give that when the king goes to sleep at night, he has to put his crown someplace. So he would hang it on a mannequin right next to his royal bed. So his faithful servant said to him one night, it's a pity that your crown sits on a mannequin. I'll stand here all night. I won't budge. Put it on me. I'll be the mannequin. I want that merit. To which the king says, I'm not going to take that chance because you might convince yourself that you're the king. The mannequin won't have such a thought. That's a good example here. The servant is a bittul of self-negation. He's a human being with his own mind and heart. By choice, he has decided to subjugate himself to the king, and the king is everything. But you give him a crown, you got to watch out. He's got to make sure his bittul is paramount. The mannequin is the king's. There is no separate entity here, and the mannequin is not going to decide to be a king, and therefore the bittul is absolute. But the trick of this Sicha is to translate these analogies of a car, a horse, or a mannequin into a human. That even a human, a yid, a servant of Hashem, is capable of having that kind of relationship. And the Rebbe is going to explain it by virtue of an Eved in a second. Well, I want to give one more example that I heard in the name of Rabbi from Shmulik Shor in his fantastic shiurim on this Sicha. He says that the example is that when the Kohen, we say this in the Yom Kippur service in the Avodah, when we bow down on the floor, when the Kohen Gadol would say, the language is when the Kohanim and the people standing in the Azor in the courtyard would hear the name of Hashem proclaimed, the ineffable name of Hashem proclaimed by the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur is the only time that name was proclaimed. Hayukorim v'noflim al-pleim, they would bow, mishtachvim, they would fall on their faces, and it would shout, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Elad. And we mirror this in our Yom Kippur service, and we fall down 3 or 4 times during such a proclamation. Because they heard the name of Hashem, and the way we understand it, this wasn't an action, but it was a reaction. They heard the name of Hashem, the ineffable name of Hashem, forget about it. They fainted, they fell down. So Chassidim explained, but what about the Kohen Gadol himself? He stood strong. The high priest, nowhere it says that he fell. He stood, he didn't faint, he didn't cry, he didn't turn white. He stood like a dedicated servant because the Kohen Gadol is such a level of oneness and commitment with Hashem. If he's able to survive the experience of Kodesh HaKodashim, he doesn't need to faint. He goes in, he stands there, full glory. He says the name of Hashem. There's no fainting. There's no falling. Because it's not about him. He gets it. He's like American. He's in such a level of commitment, like a Shimon Bar Yochai, who's right there. So he stands there with the full glory. There's no need for humility. There's no need for Sinai. It's just Har. The rest of the people, they all fainted. So, says the Rebbe, that the Rebbe is going to explain this in the Sicha. This is the difference between a shliach and an eved. A shliach is a very, sometimes, if you look in Samach Vav, which is one of the sources of this Sicha, there's a model of a ben and an eved, a child and a servant. I don't know enough Chassidus to make the determination that it's the same. It's probably not. But as a general example, what's the point of a ben and an eved? A ben is a separate personality who's connected, whereas an eved loses his own independence completely. So perhaps that's similar here, but take that or leave that. The shliach means similar. The concept is that there is a human being who is sent on a mission by the master, becomes a shliach, and he becomes an extension of it. And this is very powerful. A shliach is a very powerful thing. Halacha says that if I'm supposed to marry a woman, and by me placing a ring on her finger, she now becomes mine. And this is a big deal. It's huge. It's capital offense. If she's not loyal and etc., she becomes mine. I can do this through a shliach. I give the shliach the ring or whatever it is, and he goes to the other country or the other city, and he puts it on her finger, and she becomes combined with me. And the same thing is in the reverse, God forbid, in a get. So, and then many other examples, a shliach literally is your extension, which means it's a sense of bittul. It's another person who now becomes my extension. Powerful. He's loyal. He's separate. An eved becomes the possession of the master. The connection is absolute. It's entirely one. And the Sicha is going to take it apart in detail, but just to give it as a heading, by the shliach, the connection is not complete. Whereas in the eved, the connection is complete. What's an example of that? What happens if you send the shliach to marry the woman for you, and while he's there, he finds a lost object in the street? Who does the object belong to? Him or the sender? Obviously, it belongs to him. But you're going to say, what do you mean? He's my shliach. I'm the one who sent you. Sent you from New York to California to marry this woman for me. Or God forbid, divorce. And while you're there, you find that diamond ring in the street. You find that tremendous Aveda, or whatever it might be, a minkot. So a person might say, what do you mean? You picked up the minkot, but you're my shliach, and therefore it belongs to me. There's no such thing in halacha. Yeah, I'm your shliach to the extent that to the act of the kedushin, for the mission that you gave me. For that, I'm totally yours. I'm batel. But there's an I that's batel. And therefore, I'm not completely batel. I didn't disappear. The whole idea is that this is the first type of bittul. There's negation of self, which means there's a self to negate. There still remains, no matter what, some level of self. And therefore, even though I'm completely your extension, that I could give her the ring and you're married, a second earlier or later, I find this diamond ring or this minko, that it belongs to me. It has nothing to do with the sender. Because I'm not the sender. Two things do not become entirely one. Whereas if you're my slave, the halacha is that kol ma shekana eved kana rabbi. Whatever the servant acquires is owned by the master. And if a servant is walking down the street, he finds a lost object, it belongs to the master. Rabbi brings in the footnote from the Rajba. See, there are various opinions. Most opinions apparently is that it's not that it automatically belongs to the master. Imagine the servant goes out. This is a slave, according to Torah, a halachic slave. He goes out and he finds this minkot. And he comes home and he says to his master, look what I found. The master has a right to say, I want it. Or he has a right to say, you keep it. According to the Rajba, though, he takes this to an extreme. No, the hand of the servant is the hand of the master, because he belongs to the master. There is no such a thing as servant. And therefore, the Rajba concludes, and the Rebbe uses this in his footnote to explain this deep Hasidic concept of bittul amiti, of true bittul, The Rebbe always likes to bring examples from Nigla, from Halacha, because they make these fine concepts very concretized. Halacha says a slave's hand is the master's hand, to the extent that the Rashba says that when he's standing in the marketplace and he finds the mink coat, at that moment the master owns it. He doesn't have to take possession. He just took possession. Therefore, because it's a complete oneness. What do we get from this whole thing? That in regular bittul, there has to be a negativity. There has to be a negation of self. There has to be a focus on humility. I'm nothing. I'm meek. I'm self-effacing. Whereas in true bittul in the context of the Sicha is not a little more bittul, a little less self. No, it's a top-down thing. It's not bottom up. I'm coming higher and more refined, and I'm giving God more of myself. No, I'm owned by Hashem, and that's what a slave is. When it comes to a slave, we say Eved Melech Melech. The slave of a king is a king. It doesn't even say he's like a king. By shliach, we say Shluch Shlo Adam Kimoso. The shliach of the person is like him. It's not him. The proof is that at the moment of the shlichus, he finds this mink coat, and doesn't belong to the sender, because he's not him. He's like him, insofar as the mission is concerned. But he's a separate entity, and he needs to be. He needs to be a smart person and a mature person to have the halacha of a shliach, etc. All kind of conditions. When it comes to an eved, he is him, and therefore there's no need for humility. A king's servant is not humble. He's standing strong. He's self-esteem. And this answers the first question, namely, why Behar and Bechukosai go together. They seem to say opposite things. Bechukosai is total subjugation, because you're doing the mitzvah with chukim without understanding. So is Behar total subjugation, beyond total subjugation. He recognizes that he is literally Hashem's servant. He belongs to Hashem, and therefore he has self-esteem, and therefore he has inner strength. It's a Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai attitude. There's nothing but Hashem. He didn't negate self. He's Hashem's servant. I want to point out that this is very, very novel. See, normally when we think of a slave, first of all, in our world, we don't like the concept of slaves. And obviously, Torah doesn't like it either. We're not sad that slavery is abolished. And the Torah discouraged people from being slaves, and a yid should never be a slave. However, slavery was part of reality, and unfortunately still part of the reality in a lot of circles. So the way I understand it, according to Chassidus, everything in the world is to give us an explanation of our relationship with Hashem and to be a model for it. The same way we have fathers and mothers and husbands and wives and sons and daughters and brothers and sisters, because all of these relationships are expressions of our relationship with Hashem. Because at the end of the day, it's all an expression of Him. The concept of a slave is a very big deal in Torah, because our relationship with Hashem, in addition to being a child and all the other things, one of the essential relationships, Avadehem, you're my slaves. Doesn't say you're my employees. There's a concept of slave. And on some level, Hashem says, you belong to me. And this Sicha says that the person, like Hashem Bayachai, this is perhaps the highest level of service, is capable of actualizing this. It's not bittul through negation. It's true bittul. And therefore, there's no need for humility. There's no need for Sinai. It's Bahar. In a sense that Rebbe just answered the question too as well. But it's going to be done much more justice to it as we go further. Okay. Sicha right now. This is the explanation. However, if you want more, we can go further. Because now this is just a very general thing. We explained there's two types of bittul, and shliach versus evet, expressed through humility versus esteem, and Behar represents the higher level. Got it. But the Rebbe goes into it deeper and takes it apart. The Rebbe is going to explain to us numerous levels of shliach, and based on that, we'll understand various levels of self-negation. And and the Rebbe is going to explain it in a nuanced way, also the way it expresses itself in the various terms that Torah uses for Sinai. Is it Har Sinai? Is it Sinai? Or is it just Har? So the Sicha becomes very delicious and interesting and wonderful. But as I like to say, if you want, you could stop here. The reason why I'm saying it is not that you should stop here, but this is, if you want clarity, hold on to this. In fact, this same screen that you see here, I'm going to re-feature later on after we introduce more of the complexity of the Sikh. So the Rebbe says, if you want to get more geschmack in this, there's a discussion in Nigla in Halacha. As I said earlier, the Rebbe likes to borrow from Halacha to explain Hasidic concepts. First of all, the Rebbe maintains very strongly that all of Torah is one. It's one of the things you see in the Likutei Sichos, that the Nigla and Halacha and Kabbalah, it's all one and the same, which is fantastic, which is one of the Rebbe's themes. It's all Hashem's Torah. But also, as I said earlier, when you learn Nigla, you concretize the ideas and it helps you understand Chassidus. Because sometimes Chassidus is spiritual things and it could be lost in the nuance. It can be too fine. So the Rebbe, this screen here is a halachic discussion, nothing Chassidus. And then when we finish this screen, we're going to go back to the earlier discussion and apply what we learned here. So I'm going to try to do it quickly. There's a halachic discussion about a shliach, and there's three explained by Rabbi Yosef Engel in his Sefer Lekach Tov, one of the great geniuses that Rebbe would often quote in the Likutei Sichos, one of the great geniuses of recent generations. And he said that we find in Torah and halacha three approaches or levels to a shliach. And he wonders which one is the precise one. He brings proofs for different ways. But bottom line is, he gave the Rebbe, and through the Rebbe, the world. He gave the world this gift, that there's three nuanced ways of looking at the halachic level of an agent, of a shliach who does something on my behalf and has validity. Remember, shliach is not just I send a mailman to deliver a letter. A shliach has validity. He can marry the wife in California for me. I'm in New York, and we're married. Same thing, divorce. God forbid he divorces. She's in California. He's in New York. He's now free. She's free. And the next day, they can each marry somebody else. They didn't even see each other in the interim. Because a shliach is your extension. It's very powerful. So you see how shliach lends itself to the conversation of bittul. He's your extension. I'm using marriage and divorce because they're the easiest, but there's many other examples. You can give terum on your behalf. You can give bikurim. A lot of mitzvahs that you have to do yourself, the shliach can do. So there's three approaches. One is that only the action is attributed to the sender. One is that his actual hand, and one is that he's actually identifies as the sender. This is Rabbi Yosef Engel's Chakira, his famous query. We discusses the three possible approaches, and he proves from different places in the Gemara, one way or the other way or the third way. Now, what are the differences? The first is the most simple. If Reuven sends Shimon on a mission, Shimon is not Reuven; he's a separate person. However, legally, Shimon did it, but it's attributed to Reuven. Halakha has the power to say that. You appoint him, he does it on your behalf, on your stead. It's as if you did it. But there's no deeper connection. It's just a connection of the result. Now, what he did belongs to you. It's as if you did it, attributed to you. The deeper way sometimes is a concept of Yoda Arichta in Halacha, an extended hand. Just like my field is my extended hand, the concept of an extended hand. That not only the action of Shimon is attributed to Reuven, Shimon's hand is Reuven's hand. It's much deeper. Then there's a concept in Halacha, says Rabbi Yosef Engel, possibly the shliach himself identifies as the sender. You know, we live in a world where people identify as a man, identify as a woman. You know, the bumper sticker with the Rolls Royce identifies with the broken down jalopy identifies as a Rolls Royce. This is a joke in our days, but in Halacha, Lahavd, Lalaf Abdallos, the Rebbe Yosef Engel wants to say that Torah says that Shimon is empowered by Reuven to be him. And to the extent of this mission, he is him. So when he goes to California and puts the ring in the woman's finger, it's Reuven who did it. But Reuven's 3,000 miles away. No. Reuven is sort of Shimon identifies as Reuven. Not that he's Reuven. He can't live with that woman. She's not his wife. And as I said before, he's not Reuven. He picks up the mink coat that belongs to him, not to Reuven. But to the extent, insofar as this mission is concerned, he is Reuven, and therefore that's why it makes sense that Reuven to him or diverts from him, because Shimon did the action. It's a very fantastic thought, this third level. Just to make it interesting, I want to point out the halachic differences between 1, 2, and 3. This is not in the Sicha. The Sicha uses these three examples of Yosef Engel. It brings it to the Sicha in detail, and it's fundamental to the build of the Sicha. But this halachic differences, I'm bringing in from my own research because I feel like it clarifies it. Otherwise, it doesn't seem to have meaning. What's the difference? I'll do it quickly. You see, a halachic difference is an example. These examples are brought down in Rabbi Yosef Engel's book of Sefer Lekach Tov. Imagine, could a shliach serve as a witness? So that Reuven sent Shimon to California to make the marriage. Could he also be one of the witnesses under the chuppah for that marriage? So it depends. If the shliach is like number 3, he's actually, if Shimon is now, for the extent of this act of the kedushin, he's actually Reuven, how can he be a witness? He's the guy. You can't be a witness at your own ceremony. If you're a chassid, you can't be the witness. And if Shimon, for the extent of the marriage, is the groom, there's no way you can be the witness. However, if it's merely that his action is attributed to the other guy, or even his hand, his behavior to do the action is attributed to the other guy, but he's not Reuven, he can act as a witness too. Another difference is number B. See how I laid it out? Case A, that would be the difference. The third one will be no, the other two will be yes. Case B, the shliach appointed a second shliach and died. Is the mission still valid? So Reuven sends Shimon to California to do the wedding, to marry somebody for him. And in California, before he has a chance to find her, he's not feeling well. So he appoints Levi to be the extended shliach. Reuven appointed Shimon. Shimon now appointed Levi. Shimon wasn't feeling, maybe he put himself into Kaiser Hospital. He wasn't feeling well. And Levi, the next day, does the mission, completes the mission. The rule is shliach is a shliach. A shliach could appoint another shliach. Time's over. But in the interim, Shimon died. Unfortunately, he wasn't feeling well, and he was in Kaiser Hospital or wherever, and he actually passed away before the kedusha took place. So now the question becomes, So the Yosef Engel said the Gemara has a debate about this. Some say, what do you mean? The second shliach died. How could the shliach continue? The guy in the middle died. The thing is discontinued. Others say no. As long as the husband is still alive, the shliach still continues. This is a debate and a halachic argument in the Gemara. Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, this will depend on this chakira. He wants to argue. If you say 2 or 3, if you say a shliach is actually an extension of the principle, Shimon died, but now Levi is standing and giving the ring to the woman on behalf of Reuben. And he's a valid shliach because he was appointed by the second shliach. That's fine. It's transferable. Levi is now Reuben. So then it's good. Levi is now Reuben. Reuben's still alive. Even if Levi is Reuben's hand, Reuben's still alive. However, if he is just, a shliach doesn't become an extension of anybody. A shliach is just empowered by the one who sends him to be an agent to carry out a certain behavior which will be attributed to the one who sent him. You can't skip the middle guy. So Reuven approves Shimon, and Shimon's action will be attributed to Reuven. Shimon now passes that along to Levi, that Levi's action should be attributed to Shimon's action, which are attributed to Reuven. You can't skip the middleman. How could you? All the agent does is he becomes the ability to his action to be attributed to his sender. So that has to go back through all the steps. You don't jump from the third to the first. The middle guy died, there's no kedushin. Whereas if you say no, that a shliach becomes the sender's hand or the sender himself, well, he's a shliach ultimately, even though he was appointed by Shimon, he's a shliach of Reuven. Reuven's alive. Briefly, the third case, C, he said that a guy appoints a shliach to bring bikurim. You could do that, even though you're supposed to bring it yourself. The same way you could send someone to marry a woman, you could send someone to bring you truma, you could send someone to bring you bikurim. But then, what happened was, on the way there, the guy took the bikurim, the shliach, and on the way to Yerushalayim, he died. The owner got wind of it. Let's use the same names. Reuven is the owner, Shimon is the shliach. Reuven finds out, so he quickly changes his plans, and he travels and he picks up his bikurim from wherever they were left by the dead shliach, and he continues the journey to bring it to the Beis Hamikdash. Seems very good. The problem is that there's a halacha, especially by bikurim, that we learn from the verses that the same person who took it has to be the one to deliver it. Apparently, it cannot change hands. It's a special thing by bikurim. The pasuk says, "V'lokach v'nichai." The one who brings it has to place it in the Beis Hamikdash. And here the question becomes: is it the same person? So it would be in C. The answer would be yes. In two and three, rather, the answer is going to be yes. 2 and 3 says that a shliach is literally a hand of the mishalech, or at least, or even more so, he's actually him, so to speak, reincarnated. He identifies as him. So therefore, Shimon started the mission. He couldn't complete it. Shimon did the first step, the lokach, the taking. Reuven is going to do the bringing, the hinichai, and the hava, lekicho and hava. That's the language. The taking and the bringing has to be one person by bikurim. It's a special law. No, the lekicha is done by Shimon. The hava is done by Reuven. But remember, Reuven and Shimon are one and the same, because Shimon is Reuven's shliach. Either he's his hand or he's actually identifies as him. Not a problem that Shimon died in the middle. Reuven picks up where he left off. But if it's just that he is an agent to do it on his behalf, but the fact it's another person, that other person has to do the lekicha and the hava. Otherwise, it won't work. So this is just, I'm putting this in on the side for those who like this, just to make it clear that there's halachic relevance. Not sure why I did this piece, because it's not in the Sicha. The Sicha doesn't bother with this. But to me, without knowing these differences, it didn't have the excitement. So there's 3 levels. You don't see the difference, and that's why I put this in, not just to give you a headache. Because I felt like this would make the Sicha a lot sweeter. What do I want you to get from this screen? At the 3 levels of shlichus. From Rabbi Yosef Engel, which Rebbe talks about. It's a very big subject in the Kutta Sichas. It's a meaningful discussion. And there's differences in halacha between them. Now we're going to come back to our Chassidus. Now that we understand these 3 levels a little bit, let's come back and bring it home. So now I cut and paste the same screen from the first screen. First thing we accomplished in the Sicha was understanding the bittul and true bittul. The bittul expressed through a shliach, which is loyal but separate, where versus the bittul of an eved, which is a possession of the master. Remember what we learned? And the shliach is the connection is not complete. And the eved it is, and that's why if the shliach picks up a lost object, it's not his, whereas the eved picks it up, it belongs to the master. Automatically, even according to the Rajba. And we explain what's the extension of this. This is key. The second line from the top. That the first bittul, the non-complete bittul, is negation of self, because how else can bittul happen? If B is going to become buttal to 1, he has to negate himself. And therefore, it's not about me, it's about you, but it's a negation. Therefore, it comes with humility, meekness, self-effacing. Whereas if it's true bittul, to begin with, from the top down. All I know is that there's the master and I'm his possession, no difference than his car or his horse or his jacket. So I don't have to I don't have to be humble in order to make sure that I don't think I'm separate. There is no separate. Like Hashem ben Yechai, Perei Ha'adon Hashem darash bi. He doesn't have, you need humility. There isn't even a him to speak of. And therefore it comes with self-esteem, and we talked about it, and that's how we explained the Behar. It represents really the greatest form of bit. So the Rabbi here is just taking the same thing, but giving it much more geschmack and detail. You might say that Sicha does this just the way I'm doing it, in 2 phases, the general phase and then detail. What I did till now was explained in Ois, in the Sicha, Ois Gimel and Dalet. And now, what we're going to do now explaining the same thing, but breaking it up to more levels, not just shliach versus eved, but 3 levels of shlichus versus eved, which makes it much more gishmak. This is in the Sicha Ois Hey. So the Rebbe says, this is so rich. This is beyond rich. The Rebbe says, take a look. The 3 applications, the Chassidic application of a shliach. In our halachic discussion, we said a shliach has 3 levels. What does it mean, 3 levels? Each one is less of him, more of the master. The Rebbe explains, and that what does it mean, the first level, that it's just his action is attributed. He's a separate person. But what I did it, Shimon did it, but it's attributed legally to Reuven. That represents a person in the service of Hashem whose commitment is external. It's Kabbalah Sel. He's accepting it. Hashem told him do it, he does it. He's not convinced intellectually or emotionally. His will is elsewhere. He's shallow. The relationship is shallow. However, there's a commitment. My action is committed. So that would be the Hasidic counterpart of level 1 shliach. Only his action tributes to the Mashaliach. That represents a Yid, a Chassid, what have you. He's a servant of Hashem. He wants to be batal to Hashem. But how much of himself is batal, how much of himself is negated, is action. But that's it. The second level is the person that, no, even his hand, not just his behavior, but even his hand, I mean, almost like his actions, his behavior is the master's, not just the result of the behavior, the action, but his hand itself. And this the Rebbe explains here and illuminated more elsewhere in other places in the Sichas, that this represents that his mind and heart. He's not just Kabbalah Sil. He's a dry action. He's doing it for Hashem. And the rest of himself is not there. That's a very external connection. No, this person, he's a chassid. He's a chabadnik. His mind and heart, he gets it and he feels it. He's invested. Then there's even a higher level. The shliach identifies as the sender. This means that even his willpower is ratzin. Because who is a person really? His willpower. His will belongs to Hashem. This is a big chassid. And of all 3, there's still him. Because this is one level of negation versus the other. First, my hand, my action doesn't belong to me. Whatever Hashem tells me to do, I'm going to do it. Then there's no, even my mind and heart I'm giving him. But that's not my whole essence. Even my willpower I'm giving him. But there's still me that gave it away. Follow? And therefore, we're going to see the different levels. So the main point is that these are the 3 different levels that exist. So, says the Rebbe, now here's what happens. Here's what happens like this. So if you look down on the screen at the bottom, take it column by column. Don't get overwhelmed with all the columns. So when it says over there, 1, 2, and 3 obviously represents these 3 shluchim that we just described, these 3 levels of a chassid. So the first level, his dedication is only in action, which means his bittul. Let's do the first 2 columns. The next one is, no, his mind and heart are connected, as we said, and therefore he has a connection. You can't say that his bittul is external. He has more of a connection. When you talk about the third shliach, his willpower is committed. This is an inner bittul. The Rebbe calls it a chibur panimi, I think the language is. There's a real connection. A bittul panimi. And in terms of the feeling, the first guy feels himself. But I'm going to do what I'm told by a Shulchan Aruch, by Hashem. His feeling is about him. His behavior is committed to Hashem. The second one is, no. Imagine a chassid, his mind and heart, he gets it, he understands Gadlus Hashem, he understands Achdos Hashem, and his heart is there, a certain level of love for Hashem. His life, his experience is his bittul. This guy's like kumsi kumsa. It's him and Hashem. If I feel my bittul, that means I feel a negation of self. I feel self, I feel negated. I feel me, I feel Hashem. This is somewhere in the middle. That's pretty good, though. It's pretty good, nice level. He's not just doing it and it's all about it, and that he's just feeling him, but his behavior he gave away. He gave away his feeling. But that feeling is in the middle. He feels his bittul. He feels himself, and then he needs to give it away. It's in between. Whereas the third guy feels Hashem. Still not, you can't call it like the bottom of the screen, the slave, which is true bittul. It's inner bittul. It's real, but it's not true bittul. Why not true bittul? If you feel Hashem, that means you're not Hashem. You didn't unite with Hashem. There's you and Hashem, and you feel Hashem. You gave your willpower over it. I'm saying it in other words in the column called mission. The first level, he does it. Second level, he knows the mission. Doesn't just do it. The third level, he feels the mission. A lot of this I'm getting from Shmulik Shor's class on the Sicha and from different the Shurim of Rabbi over the years. The bottom line, let's go on the column called connection. The bottom line is, so how would you describe the connection? Is it positive or negative? This is very relevant. You see, remember we said that the two columns of true bittul, a bittul versus true bittul, that in regular bittul, you have to have a negation, hence humility. Whereas in true bittul, if to begin with, top down, you don't exist, you're just a possession of the master, like the car and the horse, or the eved, the slave, then you don't have to have negation. It's positive. I am him, self-esteem, like Hashem Bayachai on that high level. So therefore, if you look at the column called connection, so let's take it apart. If the connection on the level, the lowest level person, he's a yid, he's committed, but it's very dry, he's lacking, he's not really in it. Then his bittul is negative. There's him, and he's negating his will and doing what Hashem wants. It's very nice, but it's all negative. He's got to take away from himself. Then the two other levels, 2 and 3, it's not clear in the Sicha, but the Sicha yings and yangs back with it. It's negative and positive. He's in a way, it's positive. He already has some real connection. You can't say it's just an external connection. He's not just doing it. He knows it and he feels it. He has a connection. So the bittul now is positive. He feels part of Hashem. You can't just say he put aside self. Hashem has overtaken his mind and heart. And Hashem is in the level 3. Hashem has overtaken his desire, his willpower. So it's not just bittul that I'm not me. I am Hashem's extension in a way, because now his will is Hashem's and his mind and heart is Hashem. On the other hand, he's still a human being, and he just gave this up. So therefore, there's still he has to watch out. He has to still hold on to the negative, because his ego will get in the way. He'll get all excited about how smart he is and how close he is to Hashem and become arrogant. So again, since in all told, all levels of bittul, you're graduating the ego is still the underlying default. And therefore, even as he is able to embrace a positive form of bittul, namely that his mind becomes Hashem's thinking and his ratzon becomes Hashem's will, he still has to be mindful of humility. We're going to see when it comes to the slave. Let's do the slave column, then we'll come back to the Har Sinai column. The slave, his dedication is entire. It's not action, it's not mind and heart, it's not will. He looks at you, he doesn't know what you want. You ask him, how buttle are you? What do you mean buttle? There's no buttle. I belong to the master. It's entire. And therefore, it's not a bittul that's external or connection or inner. It's true bittul. And he doesn't feel himself or Hashem. He just feels nothing. He's just here to do the job completely. Whatever the master wants, that's what he wants. Whatever the master thinks, that's what he thinks. Therefore, the connection is positive. He doesn't have to have a negative connection or even a mix of both. He doesn't have to worry about humility. And this goes back to the original discussion on top of the screen. He doesn't have to worry about being humble and I'm nothing and I'm self-effacing and I'm meek. Eved melech melech. I'm a slave of a king and I'm going to look like a king and act like a king. I'm Shalom Bayachai. I'm this guy's car. I'm going to be mint condition. I don't need to have any sense of humility. There's no issue. Says the Rebbe, that explains a fantastic thing in Chazal. We find the Chazal different ways that the mountain Har Sinai is described at. In the context of this Sicha, Har Sinai gives the message of a person's service of Hashem. Namely, the combination of Sinai, humility, and Har, sense of strength. So here you have the 4 levels. Sometimes when we speak about the lowest level, we use with the person who's on the first level. the emphasis is Sinai. This guy, if you give him any sense, B'tchilas Aveda, the Rebbe says, at the beginning of the service, Kabbalah Sale, he's just at that level where he's just trying to be a servant of Hashem and dedicate himself, his action to Hashem. He's not committed yet. He's not, he feels himself. He's still full of himself. He's still about him. So here the focus is humility, because the only way to connect to Kedusha is humility. Shiflos, that's what Kedusha is. Because Ein Avada is nothing but Hashem, and if you're something, you're in the way. So therefore, the first level is Sinai. However, we will also say Har Sinai, in parentheses, because as we said by the beginning of the conversation, that even such a person needs to have a Shminish 164th. Person has to have some sense of self. Otherwise, it's going to be a problem, because he won't feel that his service is important. He won't be able to win the battle of the Yetzer Hara in a case of a test. But this is all that he has to bring in, a sense of ego, which is unholy. This is very important. Here the Har is unholy. He has to bring in Klippa. Arrogance is unholy. Ego is unholy. There's nothing holy about it. Holy is humility. However, you bring in a dose of unholy, of Klippa, in order to save him. Just like a person might tell himself, I'm not going to do this thing because I'm afraid of Gehenna, where I want reward. This is not holy. This is serving yourself. But nevertheless, everyone understands that it's better to do that and avoid chas v'shalom, a real sin, than not. So there's sometimes an allowance given on that level of service. This is most of us. I'm just committed, period. Even though I don't feel it, my mind and heart, my soul, my will is elsewhere, but I want to be committed. My focus should be Sinai. Humble. But I also have to feel good about me. I have to feel good about me, otherwise I'm going to lose the battle with the Yetzer Hara, and I'm not going to feel important in my service, the 2 points we made earlier. But that feeling of self is not really Kedusha. It's an allowance of Kalipa to help. You have to have a little bit of gaiva, a little bit of ego, as unkosher as it is, to help me that I shouldn't fail and become a despondent. Then when you go up to level 2, here, the person has a real meaningful connection to Hashem. His mind and heart, he's a Chabadnik. He learns Chassidus. He understands Achdus Hashem, and he loves Hashem, and he davens. He feels connected. His mind and heart, which is the mainstay of the person, is in. So this person already could really have Har. He could feel a sense of accomplishment, and this is not Klippa. Things were reversed. Before, Sinai was Kedusha and Har was Klippa, but allowable. Here, and it was like a vitamin, a pill to help temper the Sinai. You shouldn't fall to despondency. But here in level 2, the Har is the default. Feel good. You're a chassid, you're Eved Hashem, you have a real meaningful connection on some level. Feel good about it. However, since you're still relatively in the beginning of the service, you're just in step 2, you're just one step away from a sense of arrogance. Make sure that you don't forget the Sinai. Make sure you don't forget that it's all about Hashem, this sense of self. So now the Sinai becomes the pill, the vitamin, the pepper to qualify the Har, that it shouldn't become misunderstood by the person and become, God forbid, real arrogance. Then the third level, the Rebbe says this in a footnote, that sometimes in Torah we don't say Har Sinai, we say Har. We just say the word mountain. We already took out the word Sinai because we don't have to explicitly speak about the humility. The person is such a level where his Ratzon is given away to Hashem. This is probably the level of a tzaddik, I don't know. Certainly a very high level. His Ratzon is given away to Hashem. Does he have to worry about arrogance? No. He is close to the real bittul in a sense. He's very high. And therefore, it's mostly mountain. You don't even mention Sinai, but you do reference it. Har, the mountain. By saying Har, you don't just say Har. The mountain is a reference to Sinai. Aha. By that, you indicated that, remind yourself, you're still a human being. As much as you rose up higher and you're more refined, I'm assuming it's not a tzaddik. Let's say it's a very high level chassid. And even your Ratzon is given to Hashem, and therefore you feel good about it and go with your sense of this. But if you don't have some element of Sinai, at least not in the reference of Har, you can fall off. Then Behar. There's not Har. There's no reference to what Sinai is. Just call Behar. We named the Parsha Behar. This is the level that a person like Yeshua Ben Yechai, who gives himself over in the sense that he belongs to Hashem. And therefore, this is top down. It's not that he went through the gradations, which the common denominator of all these gradations is that the bittul is through negation of self. As much as you negate self, you're still busy with self. The default still remains self, and therefore you still have to worry about some concept of arrogance. But if it's a top down, this is what the Rebbe calls it the Sicha, bittul amiti, true bittul. There's no negation of self. It's the bittul is through positive of self. I'm here because I'm his servant. I'm his car. I'm his horse. I'm his mannequin. And therefore the linkage, this is the last column, the linkage is not just in the mission, the linkage is in everything. In every single part of the person's service of Hashem and in every part of life. There's no part of his life that is left out of the mission. So then this takes us, so now we answered why the parsha is called Behar. This was the second question. We already answered earlier why we connect Behar and Bechukosai. The Rebbe is going to revisit it in a second. But what do we answer? Because Behar really means bittul. Bechukosai means bittul. Bechukosai means bittul because you're doing mitzvahs without understanding the reason. Behar also means bittul. Really? Behar is bittul. Behar means a mountain. It means true bittul. And this is also explained the second question that we had, why it doesn't say Behar Sinai. It doesn't even say Behar. It says Behar. I mean, the text says Behar Sinai, but the name that Chazal have coined for this parsha is just Behar. This is a person who's not a shliach on level 1, 2, 3. He's an Eved Hashem. He's a Hashem Bayachad. Belongs to God. There's no him. So this is like a home run. This is like he belongs to Hashem completely, and therefore the Behar is the best parsha to belong and to be the alter ego of Bechukosai. And then, to bring this home, bring this home, this is very Gishma. Again, you could stop the Sicha right there. You have this explanation of bittul and true bittul. And now you have it in a more deeper understanding. And it connects with the different levels of Shliach. And how Behar is a whole different level. And you have the answer to both questions. But the Rebbe doesn't leave a stone unturned. And the Rebbe says that this is the connection of Behar-Bechukosai and the theme. Not just in general, but in specifics. In general, Bechukosai means bittul because it means chukim. You're doing mitzvah without understanding. But the Rebbe says specifically, Bechukosai means it mirrors exactly the Behar theme that we just learned. Bechukosai, why the mitzvahs of chukim, the word chukah means also chakika, engraved, like a letter that's engraved in a stone. The Rebbe says, analyze, most letters are written ink on parchment, and this is a letter engraved in a stone. What's the difference in terms of their connection? So both the ink and the parchment and the letters in the stone are one. You can't say that the ink is less one with the parchment than the stone is with the letter. The oneness is there. Proof is, write a word. Bereshis bara Elokim. You can't write it without a parchment. You can't write it without ink. So obviously they need each other. The same thing is with the stone. So when we speak about the beauty of chukah, that it represents the idea of engraved, it's not about the fact that they become one. Of course, they become one in any case. You might say the ink and the parchment, that's a unity of like a shliach. Even the highest level shliach, the two become one. There's still two that became one. But what's special about letters on a stone, that there isn't two things that became one. The identity here is just a stone. Go find me the letter. There's no letter. There's just stone. The letter is the stone. It's part and parcel of stone. It's a perfect example for the concept of the Eved, as described in this Sicha. And therefore, Kosai, Chukim, which means a Yid's relationship to mitzvahs. He doesn't need to understand why. And why does he not need to understand the reason? Because he's one with Hashem. Not that he's a dedicated shliach, a dedicated chassid, and he went up the ranks from level 1, 2 to 3, and his heart and his mind and his ratzon is dedicated, but there's still him being dedicated. That's like the ink in the parchment. He's connected. He's very connected. He's totally connected. He's not connected. There is no him. Go find the letters in the stone. It's impossible. There's no letters. I tell you, I'm selling you the letters, not the stone. The stone, the only thing the letter is because there's a stone. That's the analogy of the slave, of the Ived Hashem, which is what a Yid is really, and this level of Hashem, etc. That he is one with Hashem on that level. Just like the letters are the stone. They didn't unite with the stone, they are the stone. Whereas a shliach, all these high levels is still this the letter united with the paper. And therefore, Bechukosai is chukim. When a thing is engraved, when a Yid is one with Hashem, like that level, he needs to know a reason. Why does he need a reason? Why does a person need a reason? Because he is separate and he needs to understand why he's doing it. If you're one, you don't need a reason. It's just natural. What he wants is what I want. It's not what he wants I'm going to do. The Rebbe takes it further. And this is why I emphasize the whole time that the connection is complete and not complete. This is very important. Being that by the Eved, the connection is absolute, by the Shliach, by this Eved Hashem that's going higher and higher, at the end of the day, it's still not complete. He's still a separate being. The Eved belongs, he's the possession of the master. It isn't a matter of their gradation. Shmuel Shor gives the example that, you ask a person, how dedicated, what a big chassid, how dedicated are you to Elokus? One level, another level, he's committed, he's dedicated. When a person's an Eved, like this level of Shem B'Yechai that the Sicha is speaking about, it's like saying, how dedicated is your jacket to you? Is your jacket really dedicated? What do you mean? I used in my example the car. They would say, it's you, it's yours. It belongs to you. And that's this level of the bittul of talking. So the Rebbe connects it here like this. Look at this. The Rebbe is going to say, this becomes the kicker of the Sicha. Possibly harder to explain, but let's give it a shot since we came so far. But it's also very sweet if you can follow it, if you can handle it, if I can do the right job with it. And that is the following. That Rebbe said this is why we see that in chukim, a person is told to try to understand it also. The Rambam says a strange thing, that even though chukim mitzvah is super rational, person should try to find reasons as much as possible. I don't understand. Either the mind is playing a role or not. It's a strange thing. And there's another concept that Rebbe says that if you look in Teda, we explain in great detail how irrational chupim are, how super rational. Why are you explaining it? If you try to tell me not to think, so don't explain it. Just tell me do it. The Rebbe says chukim is special. It's not gezeidos. It's different. There's decrees. There's a concept of decree. It's a very low level of relation. Hashem said, do what you do. Let's call it. That might be the first level of shliach. Hashem said, do what I do it. But when you talk about the chukim level, here we're not saying don't think, put aside your mind, be a dumbbell, because you're on the level of Kabbalah Cell, you're on the basic level, and you are a mess, and your mind and heart are elsewhere. You put your mind away, don't put your mind away. You're in a chukim relationship. Try to find any appreciation. The Rambam says this, and the Rebbe loves this. The Rambam talks about it a lot. Try to find the meaning of Parah Aduma, the meaning of Shatnez, the meaning of chukim, because we'll find a reason. And why not? You're telling me this is a service of Hashem without the mind? If you belong totally to Hashem, the mind is included. And here you're able to do two opposites. If it's me separating, committing to Hashem, so if you're telling me I'm in the mode of Seichel, my mind is working. If I'm in the mode of Kabbalah Sel, my mind is not working. Gezerah, I'm not thinking. Here by Chukim we say, you're not supposed to think, you're not supposed to second guess it. That means that you're thinking, but you're not supposed to doubt it. That means you are thinking. Whatever inverses it. Because remember, this is very, very important. Since Chukim is all-inclusive relationship, you belong to him. Your mind belongs to him too. And it's not a problem to be two opposites at the same time. You do it without knowing the reason, and you know exactly why you don't know the reason, and exactly how it's irrational, and that's a rational thing to you. Or the other point that ever makes that you want to know, you find all kind of the Muslim in the chukim. Because in this level of service, there's no resistance. I think that's the part here. There's no resistance. In a level of decree, gezeira, Hashem said to do it, it makes no sense to me. But I do it, it's a gezeira. There's a resistance. My mind says, what the heck? But I say to my mind, I'm not playing mind now. I'm giving away my commitment. There's resistance. It's not all-inclusive. Mashenkin over here, the whole thing of this Sicha is that when it comes to the Yebet, the connection is complete. You belong to him. Even your arrogance, your self-esteem is his. There is no self. The self is his. And therefore the mind, there's no place that's resistant. It's not shot that he's forcing himself not to think to do it. He's an Eved. If it makes sense, if he's supposed to put his mind in, he puts his mind in. If he's supposed to do it, he does it. If he's supposed to do it without understanding and understand how it's misunderstood, he does that too. I hope this makes sense. Think it through. Ultimately, this is how the Rebbe finishes that, and it comes down to reward. It's the same concept. The Sicha finishes that. Behar-Bechukosai speaks about reward. It's counterintuitive. Behar-Bechukosai speaks about reward, the first portion of our Torah portion. This is speaking at length in other Sichas, but here the Rebbe just puts it very briefly. Normally, Behar-Bechukosai, if it means total commitment, there should be no reward. If you're at a level of you're serving Hashem without understanding, you're looking for reward. So the Rebbe explains that on Al-Pi Chasidus, it means you're so one with Hashem, you're so engraved with Hashem. Remember, the letters are part of the stone. There isn't even letters to speak of. Which represents that the person understands that him and the whole world are just an extension of Hashem. So he doesn't need a reason, and he doesn't need reward for the same reason, doesn't need a reason. But he knows if Hashem wills it, it's going to be good in a physical sense too. Why not? There's no space outside of Hashem, and there's no part of his life outside of Hashem. The example is given by Rabbi in other contexts of the same discussion, that if a person is moved by his essence, let's say a person is very happy, he's going to start to dance. What does he have to do? His happiness is in his mind. How come he's dancing with his feet? And the answer is happiness is all-encompassing. And therefore, if he's really all happy, his whole person's going to move. Similarly, if a person is connected to Hashem and he understands this level of Eved, and he understands that Hashem is in it Muvadi for real, and therefore he's not Batal. There is no him, he just belongs to Hashem. So then his mind will not need to be canceled out. And he'll bring his mind to play with the same passion that he puts his mind out when need be. He's there. He doesn't have to have negation. Not of ego, not of mind, and not of physical blessings. He knows that the physical blessings are all part of the shlichus. I want to just suggest that even though the Rebbe clearly in the Sicha says this is the level of B'Shim B'Yachai and explain other Sichas, it's a very, very high level that we just described. So why are we learning it? So the Rebbe says in the Sicha that we're all capable of it to some degree. Because in essence, a Yid is really this level. In essence, a Yid is really one with Hashem. And the way it looks in the Sicha, it comes out in a time of test, time of Nisayan. I want to suggest, and it's not a big stretch, it's not a big stretch, that the Rebbe says in other places that in the last generations, the whole existence is a Nisayan. And therefore, this is part of our shlichus. On our level, not that we should commit ourselves that we're Avishum B'Yachai at all, but on our level, we're capable of this relationship. The Rebbe says in a Sicha B'Yutrat Tafshin Chav Beis. Normally we describe a Rebbe and a Chassid. It's more like the Shliach thing. He connects at one level, a higher level, even on the fourth level of Shlichus, the Rebbe says elsewhere. But the Rebbe says another thing in Yud Shvat Tafshin Chav Beis, that the Rebbe is also a king, and a king, like the context of this Sicha, he owns everything. Just like in the negative, anything that belongs to Amalek, the Rebbe says you have to wipe out. Not only humans, inanimate. What did inanimate do? That's what do you mean? Its identity is Amalek. So the Rebbe says on the flip side, Meruba Mida Toiva, if you belong to the king, so everything belongs to him. And the Rebbe is presenting this kind of bittul and unification with Chassidim and the Rebbe, which by extension means Chassidim and Elikos, Yidden and Elikos. And therefore the Rebbe wants of us on our level, we're not capable of even those 3 levels of shlichus. We're certainly not level 2 and 3, most of us. We're not moving our minds and hearts and our ruts, and it's very high levels. Big Chassidim of yesteryear, perhaps, had a much closer relation to that. However, at the same time, in our generation, the Rebbe gave us marching orders. And I believe, and I don't think this is a big stretch, that this long Sicha and so many other Sichas like it bring home that this highest level is connected to us, even though we may not be shaykh to the other levels in between. How so? Because at the end of the day, we're plain people. But at least we have the simple basic knowledge that if we have a life, it's the Rebbe. If we have a purpose, it's to fulfill his shlichus. Even though we're still enjoying life and we're not ever anywhere close to the level we're talking about. But conceptually, the identity of the chassid knows, I belong to the Nasi Adar. And at least I'm going to dedicate my life to his mission, to his mitzvahim, to his shlichus, to his commitments. And therefore, the shliach becomes an Eved. The Rebbe clearly said that every chassid is a shliach. So the Rebbe wants our generation to sort of take the express lane. We're the lowest level, but it connects to the highest level. The Nasi Adar is big enough to encompass us all and encompass us entirely. And therefore, we're able to have all the brachas begashmis as the Rebbe wanted. The Rebbe wasn't happy with hidden goodness. He wanted trachut v'zayin gut teva nirav nigla. It fits right into this Sicha, because when it comes Gilui HaMashiach, the revelation of the essence of Hashem and the essence of what a Rebbe is, that really all the Chassidim are Rebbe, as the Hey Tevis message. So then they all have to have goodness, and in a revealed way. How not? If everything's Elokus has to permeate in the physicality. And Elokus is good. Hashem is good. It means at least to know that he belongs to the Rebbe. He may not have a lot of appreciation and a lot of knowledge and a lot of feelings. He's a very basic person. But he understands his identity as a Lubavitcher Chassid. His identity is Eved Melech Melech, and therefore, to the best of his ability, he's going to commit to that. And in some sense, he belongs completely to the Rebbe, completely. I would love feedback. I put a lot of work to produce such a Sicha. This doesn't happen in a minute. So if this talks to you, I would love feedback.